I am delighted to introduce you to Cheryl Aschenbach. She is an English and public speaking professor at Lassen Community College, which is at the top of the state of California, and I'm delighted to have that community college represented. She is the Title III project director and has been working with Lassen Community College faculty to explore new classroom approaches and technologies to keep the faculty engaging students, and her goal is to improve student retention. I found Cheryl by Googling flipped classroom and California community colleges, and I came across a great article in the August issue of EdTech magazine about Lassen College's program and her interaction with that and her leading up that initiative. And I'll send you that link at the end of the webinar. So anyway, take it away, Cheryl. We're really glad to have you doing a Confer webinar.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that. And welcome to everybody. Glad to have you joining us. By looking, we have 120 present, which means that this is definitely a topic that people are interested in. We want to know more about, presumably, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about it. I will tell you from the front, I'm no expert, and I've only started flipping my classroom recently. I've done a lot of talking with others about it, but as you know, it's tough to change things in a classroom sometimes, and it takes time to implement new things. And so I'm only in the process of it now, and so I could share some of my experiences with you. As Title III project director here, we've been working on using more technology in the classroom, and so this came out of that discussion. And as I spoke to the gentleman who was doing the article for EdTech this summer, we were talking about a number of things, but he really caught on to the flipped classroom words. And so we kind of pursued that tact, and that's what ended up really being focused on in the article, although we're doing so much more than that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about today. Just realize, hey, none of us are experts in what we're doing, and I feel like I'm a relative rookie, honestly, but I'm going to share with you what I know today. And let's see, Michelle, I said I'd move slides. So let's look at what we're going to talk about today. 4 things primarily. Traditional approaches to instruction. We'll kind of cover that fairly quickly. Talking about flipped classroom basics. What are they? What are they not? What does it involve? How does it affect our students? Things like that. What does it take to prepare a flipped classroom? And this is where we're really going to spend some time looking at things. And then some resources that have been helpful for me, and hopefully, if you're interested in pursuing this further, helpful to you. I will have opportunities for questions after each one. Questions will have to come through the chat, but if you have something especially pertaining to that segment, definitely pop the question up in there, and when we get to that point, Michelle and I will catch you up on them and try to address what we can without getting too far behind, but definitely interested in what you want to know. So let's think first, traditional approaches to instruction. And first of all, when people think, especially of college professors, they think of people standing in the front of a room and talking and talking and talking. The whole stage on a stage idea where we're the experts and students are there to just capture every single word we say and remember it for their lifetimes. As instructors, most of us realize that's not what is happening. For one, the students aren't capturing every word we say, and the other is, I don't know how many of you are like me, but I don't want to talk for an hour or an hour and a half classroom. I want my students to get involved, and I want education to be two-way rather than one-way. And I really feel like direct instruction is very one-way. And so there certainly has problems. Students, it's not the best learning mode for many students. It's not the best delivery mode for many students. And as instructors, it can be difficult, and we never know for sure until we do an exam or some sort of a culminating activity whether or not students are capturing that information. And we definitely have a hard time knowing whether or not they can critically analyze and use and respond to that information. And so, it's really not where we want to be. And so let's go ahead and just for fun, let's take a look at Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Many of you probably remember the movie, and Ben Stein plays a great boring economics instructor. And so Michelle's going to push the video out to your desktop, and we will take a look at it, just a piece of it, as a reminder that this is not where we want to be, and that's why we're here talking about flipped classrooms. We want to be doing something very different in our classrooms. So I'll give you a moment to catch Ben Stein's words.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs. in an effort to collect more revenue for the.
Hopefully you have it loaded by now and starting to watch, and the glaze looked over our students' eyes. That's not what we want to be doing. The boredom, the confusion. I don't want to see that in my students' faces. I want them to be engaged. We talked about the direct instruction, and that's not where we want to be as instructors. So let's look at a couple other options. One is indirect instruction, and that's very student-centered. It's about really posing problems and questions to students for them to ponder and solve and come up with decisions. Generally, though, when we look at our entire body of students, those that succeed most in indirect instruction are higher achieving students. It does lend itself to high student engagement, but we're lending ourselves more to working with the higher level student. And sometimes those middle, and especially those that struggle a little bit, may not do well in indirect instruction. Another is interactive instruction. This is really more about not just problem solving, but more about applying into discussions or projects. And this can be from pairs to triads to much larger groups. And this helps bring service into the middle a little bit for students and not just the higher achievers. And depending on the student, it can lend itself to moderate or high levels of student engagement, which is either of these are preferable to only direct instruction. A couple other options that, again, offer decent student engagement: experiential learning. This is really about activities, students continuing to apply what they're learning, and really the learning process is what matters in experiential learning, that we learn through the process, not necessarily on completing or solving something. Again, serves middle to higher achieving students and has moderate to high student engagement. And then there's independent study. Generally it's instructor guided, but the student is working at their pace, doing their work. It absolutely requires student motivation and time management and relying on their own problem solving skills. It can serve all students, but again, some of those that have weaker problem solving skills or are less willing to reach out for some assistance are going to have a little more struggles. And so generally, although it's student centered, it's not necessarily student engaged. So we want to look beyond that as well. So just kind of quick overview. Any questions at this point about some of our options for types of delivery and things we're doing in our classrooms? Certainly, I'm sure you can see how they fit into one of those 5. I don't see anybody rushing with a question, so we'll keep moving because we're not to flipped classrooms yet, and that's what you want to know about. So looking at flipped classroom basics, where do we start? I think to start, we have to know what a flipped classroom is. And it's not that old of a concept. It's only a few years old. And a couple of gentlemen in, I think it's Woodland Park, Colorado, are kind of credited, at least online, with getting the trend moving and kind of defining the term a little bit. And it's the idea that we flip homework and classwork. Whether we're doing direct lecture in class or whether we're doing more indirect and student engagement activities, chances are we're expecting our students to go home, read the textbook, do problem solving, do their homework, the activities that are related to learning. And then in class, we tell them what they need to know to go home and do those things. The flipped classroom switches that, and it kind of relies more on students pre-learning concepts, not just through reading the textbook, because we know how well they do that, but really getting the information a variety of different ways, most commonly video, from the instructor, generated by the instructor, and then coming into class to do those activities that reinforce the learning and the concepts and the critical thinking. Think math class, and many of you have probably sat in a math class, and the instructor tells you about the concept, provides some examples, and maybe gives you a little bit of time in class to try some out, and then they send you home. And what you thought you were understanding in class and were able to apply worked fine for the first few questions, and in most math chapters they get a little bit harder the further you progress through the set of activities or exercises. And so midway through, you start struggling as a student, and you're at home, and you're alone, and you struggle. You just are frustrated by the fact that you can't figure things out, and you're not being successful. Flipping classrooms flips that and gives our students a chance then to be in the environment with the teacher and with other students when they're hitting that barrier. So they look online at teacher notes, teacher videos demonstrating the concepts just like they might do in class, get a sense of how to do something, and then come into the class. Traditionally, teachers would work through a few more examples and then really use the majority of class time to get students interacting and trying and working with the material rather than just sitting there learning and listen, not so much learning, but listening to the material. And that way when that student hits the midway point and all of a sudden is hitting that wall, they have a little bit more assistance. They can ask the instructor, they can ask a peer, they can collaborate with someone to solve the problem together. And in the end, they end up with a greater sense of learning and a greater sense of ability to complete whatever task has been set in front of them related to that knowledge. I first learned about this in an alumni magazine for California Lutheran University about a flipped biology class that tests well. And Michelle, we probably don't need to go to that. We can just leave a link there.
Okay.
But yeah, that's okay. And a gentleman was teaching 2 different biology classes, and in one he was teaching traditionally in the classroom, doing the lecture, sending them home to do the typical kind of biology homework stuff. And in the other section he was flipping. He was experimenting with flipping, and he wanted to, by the end of the semester, evaluate student learning in both classes and see how they compared. Typical classroom research. And he was finding midway through that he was hearing that his students in the traditional class were catching wind of these videos available online, his lecture videos, and were jumping into the place where he was holding those and were watching them. And so they were coming to class already having seen the lectures and asking more questions. They were, if they missed class or needed to review, jumping in and looking at the lectures again. And so he was finding that student learning in both classes was improving, and he realized midway through that his research test had pretty much gone to failure in some respects as research, because both classes now were using that flipped material, and that really for him registered as, I can do something with this. So let's look a little bit further. So what a flipped classroom is not, it doesn't simply replace instruction with videos. Yes, we can use video as one way to supply the information for students to learn at home, but it's not a replacement. We are still instructing in the classroom, and you might still be instructing in a variety of ways and with a variety of technologies. It's not turning a face-to-face class into an online class. Yes, we can use an online environment to host that homework, now what used to be classwork stuff, the lectures and the information. But it's not an online class, because a really critical part of flipped classrooms is the fact that now we can do so much more in the classroom. We don't just provide the information, we can interact with the information. It's not students doing independent study. They work on their own at home, initially pre-learning the concept, but it's almost the opposite of independent study once they're in the classroom, because there's so much more we can do with them in the classroom. It's definitely not easy education for students and instructors. It requires that students invest time outside the classroom. And yes, we know that in the Carnegie model, for every unit of lecture, we expect 2 hours of time invested outside of class. And I don't know about your students, but I don't think they're doing that. I'm pretty sure they're not. It bothers me when they take pride in saying, "Well, I never opened that textbook." And this is one way to try to address that and battle that. Have textbooks, and then have that lead into whatever your lecture is particularly. So it's not easy. It's not easy for the instructors. It takes work to prepare this information ahead of time and to have things work seamlessly for students, and it's definitely some trial and error, and anyone who has tried it will say that. But let's go ahead and look at a brief video on what flipped classrooms are not, and it'll cover a little bit of what I just said plus some more.
As a flipped classroom teacher, I've seen lots of misconceptions around what the flipped classroom is and what the flipped classroom is not. So, rather than discussing what the flipped classroom is in my practice, I'll discuss a list that most flipped classroom teachers can agree the flipped classroom is not. So, let's get started. The flipped classroom is not the Khan Academy. While the Khan Academy is an excellent resource for use in and out of the classroom, the flipped classroom is special because classroom teachers create the videos to suit their students' needs. We want students to be active in their learning, not droids sitting in front of screens getting a lecture from someone halfway across the globe. The videos are an extension of the teacher and help create a strong relationship between student and teacher. The flipped classroom is not a replacement of teachers. This couldn't be further from the truth. In the flipped classroom, the role of the teacher is more important than ever. There's no sitting at the back of the class reading the newspaper and having a coffee, as much as I'd like to sometimes. In the flipped classroom, the teacher is active all day. Teachers get a chance to work with every student, every class. The flipped classroom is not all about the videos. Yeah, videos are the backbone of the flipped classroom, and I am hoping one of these days to produce a video that goes viral and perhaps appear on Ellen. However, it is the flexibility the videos provide that is the true benefit. Teachers now have additional classroom time where they can develop rich learning activities to extend their students' experience. The flipped classroom is not the silver bullet. The flipped classroom does not solve all that is broken in education. If it did, I'd probably be filthy rich. It's just one tool to increase student learning. Inflexibility, lack of classroom time, and student-centered classrooms are problems that I feel the flipped classroom helps solve. The The flipped classroom is not a one-size-fits-all teaching approach. Each flipped classroom teacher develops an approach that works for them and their students. As an example, some teachers have students watch the videos in class, some students watch them at home, in a car, on a bus, on a plane, it's turning into a Dr. Seuss book. And some even get the students to create the videos themselves. The limits of the flipped classroom are only as limited as the teacher's imagination. The flipped classroom is not top-down. The flipped classroom is 100% driven by teachers. For the model to be authentic, it needs to be initiated and created by the teacher for the teacher. How often have we attended a staff meeting to be presented with the newest flavor of the week to never give it another thought? The flipped classroom is a flavor teachers want to do because they believe in it. And it's delicious. The flipped classroom is not a teacher holiday. The flipped classroom is anything but a holiday. The amount of time that goes into creating quality videos and activities is second to none. In the classroom, teachers are no longer spending their time lecturing. Instead, they're constantly interacting with their students, inspiring, observing, and as we all know, sometimes prodding. The flipped classroom is not easy. Students have been in the traditional model of school for their entire educational career. They like playing school. Some of them are very good at it. Now that we want them to play learning, it can be a tough pill for them to swallow. And lastly, the flipped classroom is not all about students watching videos for homework. It's about students using videos when and where appropriate for their learning journey. Many of my students find that they use their classroom time so effectively they rarely have homework. And believe me, they love this. Now they have time for things that truly matter to them, like Twitter and Facebook. These are just a couple of things I think the flipped classroom is, and the flipped classroom is not.
So as you watch that, hopefully it gives you some ideas, some more ideas about what a flipped classroom is not. And like I said, it's not easy. It's not about replacing instructors. It's not about replacing classroom time. It actually helps us to augment classroom time a great deal more than we would usually. All right, so let's talk a little bit more specifically about what a flipped classroom is. For one, it's student-centered learning. The students take responsibility for their learning. They have to pre-learn outside of the classroom, and you can tell pretty easily when they come in whether or not they have invested that time and done any work with the pre-learning, watching the videos, reading the textbook. And just like you can tell now, except it really seems magnified because you're relying on them more to do that. It's about instructors teaching and facilitating learning. That's the best part of it for me. I'm a facilitation kind of person, and I don't want to just stand in front of a class and talk. I want to help students figure things out. And the fact that they can do the background work at home and then come into my classroom and we can clear up any questions, clarify concepts, and then move on to just applying the concepts and making them mean that much more, that I really like. It's an opportunity to apply multiple instructional approaches. So it's not just about meaning we never do direct instruction in class. We still will. We still can. We might do engagement activities one time. We might use indirect instruction another. But we could certainly have a lot more variety inside of our classroom instead of feeling like we have to provide the information there, that's the only way they're going to get it. And it's been, for folks that have done a lot more of flipped classrooms, are saying that it's much more engaging for students at all levels of achievement. We don't have to leave behind the lower achievers, that because we have the opportunity to work individually with students in every class period instead of just having them sitting in front of us receiving information, we get a better sense for who's struggling and what they need to move further ahead. And so it's much more individual minded.
You know what, Cheryl, I've got a couple people asking some questions. Do you want to take them now or comment?
Sure.
Yeah. Tina wants to know if you can give some examples from your public speaking course.
Sure. I haven't done a lot of the videos outside of class, but I do require them to do study guides out of their reading and a lot of breakdown or analysis of other speakers. And so when they come into the classroom, and if we've been talking about a specific topic, let's say using vocal variety for expression when they're speaking, and not just being monotone speakers, when they come into the class, we can work with that, and we can, maybe bring up a brand new example in class and have them work in groups to, further break down that speaker, student speaker or professional speaker, either way, and then maybe have them create a brief presentation where they together as small groups demonstrate various strengths or weaknesses with vocal expression. Maybe a group that specifically presents a key concept out of the reading by speaking too slowly or too quickly or too softly or too loudly, or with absolutely no expression at all, or with vocal expression that doesn't match their non-physical or nonverbal expression. And so for me, I don't have to lecture to them for an hour. I can get them working with that concept and applying it in ways that apply directly. So yes, we're going to use correct expression, but also sometimes learning by playing with it the wrong way a little bit. Like, let's see what happens if. And if I'm only lecturing in class, there's no opportunity to explore that with them and to get them to, try different things to see what works. And we'll also carry that into letting them practice an introduction from a speech or something, and again in their small groups. All right, based on what you looked at home, based on what we analyzed together in class, based on these activities we've done, give each other some solid feedback about ways they can specifically improve their vocal expression. So kind of a drawn out example there, but it gives me so much more time to get them hands-on in class. So that's one. Hopefully that helped clarify a little bit more with an example.
Yeah, I've got one more and then
Sure.
move on. Yvonne wants to know, when you provide the in-class activity, what do you do for students that don't work well in groups and go ahead and do the activity on their own at home? What will they do in class?
Some of them are very uncomfortable at first, and this is true in my English classes as well as public speaking, although in public speaking I can use the excuse that you've got to stand in front of a group, so you better get ready to work with a group. But it does get students sometimes working outside their comfort zone. And there are times when I will, in certain activities I might allow the option to work independently or in small groups. And then sometimes to get them more accustomed to working in groups, we might, maybe start individual, progress to a pair share, and then maybe into, combining a couple pairs for further discussion, so that they get that comfort of working in, their own environment at their own pace for that moment while they get things started. And then, a little bit outside the zone as they talk with one other person, and hopefully get some comfort doing that, and then building further out. I also, in all my classes, do a lot of interactive stuff to get students meet and greets and collaborative activities and group development activities, so that they know each other a little bit and more comfortable, even if it is outside their comfort zone. But it doesn't mean I don't have students that still are like, really, we have to do this? I really don't want to. And I just really encourage them to work with me and be patient, while also being respectful that I've got to come up with ways, not always, but times when I will make sure that they can work individually, because that's where they're comfortable.
You want one more, or you want to?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. What happens when students don't do the homework, and how do you deal with this?
It becomes obvious when they don't do the homework. It can become very obvious, and peer pressure starts to play a little bit of a part, especially if I have them working in smaller groups. Students aren't always real tolerant of others who haven't done their work when they have, and so there's a little bit of that peer pressure, and because we can move right into activities, it becomes more obvious than if they didn't do their reading and now they're just listening to me in class. Nobody else knows I didn't read. There's not as much of that. If I see that it's a continual problem, I'll talk with the students and find out if there's a barrier that maybe they can't get access from home. Maybe I need to work with them to get into the library before or after class, or wander by the lab, or come in and chat with me during an office hour so I can maybe individually deliver some of those concepts. But it becomes more obvious, and I'll work with students to try to really reinforce it. That's their responsibility as students. But of course, it doesn't always happen, no matter how good their intentions.
Thanks.
Sure. So a flipped classroom also has materials online for students to view at their own pace. The nice part about this, as I mentioned with the biology example from Cal Lutheran, is that if a student, even if they're in class every day and getting material, whether they're in a traditional delivery class or not, the fact that that information's there, that they can go watch those lectures or pick up those concepts afterwards to review, or if they missed a class, instead of getting that dreaded, are you doing anything important when I miss class? We can actually say, hey, go check it out online, and they do. And so it gives students a better chance to stay current with concepts and stay current with what's going on in class. It also has students and instructors working more side by side that, I know what the learning outcomes for the class are. The students don't necessarily get what that is. They just want to finish a class. But I get to work with them more side by side as we move through the class. It's that real collaboration, not just between students, but between students and instructors, that is attractive to me. So go ahead and listen to a little bit about how it works for all of our learners.
I'm Katie Gimbar, and I'm answering questions about my flipped classroom. This question comes from Steve in North Carolina. How does this work for all learners? This is a very interesting question, one that I think we should have asked about lecture-style classrooms. How does a lecture one size fit all work for all learners within the classroom. And it really doesn't. I learned through my first week of flipped classroom that these students interact with the information differently. They were watching the lecture within class, and when I was walking around watching these students, some liked to watch the video all the way through before they took notes, some liked to pause and write down things as they went, and each of the students interacted with that information differently. So I realized that in a lecture-style classroom, they were really missing out on using their individual styles of learning to go through the information. The other thing that most people say is, well, I see how this will work with the high-level learners. That's a no-brainer for them. They'll work ahead. But what about the other students that really need some more one-on-one? What I have learned through this process has been amazing. Yes, the high-level learners, as expected, have soared through this process. They break down the information. They're ready to go ahead, work at their own pace. But the lower-level learners have also excelled because for once, the information is broken down a little bit slower. They can go back and look over information. They can work at their own pace too in order to be successful. And most amazing through this process is what I learned about the middle group of learners. This group has struggled more than any with the flip style method of teaching. And I believe that's because we've done this group a little bit of injustice with how we lecture within the classroom. We've kind of catered to the middle group of students. We've spoon-fed them information. Here, follow my example and then you do this. And so this middle group of learners has really not developed the skills they need to be successful in breaking down and applying information. And that's why flipping is really a much better method for all learners because we're helping these lower level learners go at their own pace. We're sending the higher level students on, and we're actually helping the middle group of students to learn the skills they need to apply information and start to be more successful in breaking down what they need to be successful. To learn more about flipping the classroom, visit the Friday Institute's website.
As you pointed out, the concern is really the middle achievers. And, they often do exactly what we tell them to do, and they do enough to succeed. But the cool thing about Flipped Classroom is it challenges them more to become the critical thinkers and to ask the questions and become the problem solvers, not just do as told. And again, that's another piece that's attractive to me. So, all right. Any questions? I see one, I think.
Yeah, Julie wants to know about the captioning with the videos. If you wanted to address that.
Or does it say captioning with this video?
Well, it might be this video, but I think just in general, somebody else was asked, can captioning be addressed, I think, with this video or just any of the videos?
Depending on the programs that you're using, some will actually capture video or capture your captioning. I know just recently I saw the session that Donna Eystone presented about using YouTube, and it's a pretty simple way to do things, and you can insert your script or do captioning with it, and so it's right there with your students. You don't have to pay any outside services to do it. You don't have to even do it really after the fact because you're videotaping there and can insert a script, then you can provide that information. It's something that we need to explore more as we go further with it. I don't have many more answers for that one, unfortunately. Any others popping up there?
Not that I see. Yeah, just keep going.
Okay. So let's look at preparing. Let's think a little bit about what we're going to do. I just saw a few pop up actually. Do we want to look at any of those?
How do you use this in fully online environment?
I think actually it lends itself really well to fully online environments. The fact that we often, as we have moved into online environments, have provided students with the background material for learning and concepts, often in text form. Or maybe PowerPoints that are uploaded or something, but maybe audio. The fact that we can do that in video, at least that side of it, I think offers another level of learning for students, and it helps to serve more learning styles. On the other side, the problem solving, a lot of that's already going on in online classes because you have to find ways to counter and address what's being done in the classroom. And so some of the problem solving might look very different than it would in the classroom and some of the group activities, but the idea that students are discussing, students are analyzing, students are working together on something or individually, I really think that's already happening in a lot of ways in online courses.
Let's see, Dave wants to know, how does access to internet factor into your expectations?
It's one of the concerns about flipped classrooms is we do expect if we're going to go, hurtling forward with this idea and expect it for an entire class, well, how do our students achieve it if they're not connected. And I would say, at least on our campus, if we were to fully go online or go flipped with a class, knowing that from the front, it'd be a good note to make in the schedule so that a student knows that they have to have internet connectivity. Anymore we expect it of our students, but the reality is they don't necessarily always have it. Yes, we can say they can come to the labs, they can go to the library, but it may be difficult for some, especially with time restraints. So far, I've just experimented with, a little bit here and there, and for the most part, students, when they made the time, were able to connect. It really wasn't that much of a problem. It was more about them making the time to go do it, because right now they're not used to taking the time to actually read their book very frequently. And so my biggest feedback from students was, wow, you made us do homework. And yeah, the fact that they need to pre-learn it and the pressure's on them, there's that increasing student responsibility part.
Let's see, Scott wants to know how much of their grade, the student's grade, is based on flip activities. Are they different from group presentations? If so, how?
A lot of that depends on how you grade. I am working on building in like quiz questions kind of that become a homework assignment within some of the video I'm putting out to students. Or you can always do a short quiz afterwards. You can embed it within. You can follow up with questions for students. I grade them on the participation in activities in class, sometimes on the result if it's about coming up with a product or finishing a process. It's different than just saying, hey, you get 10% for homework and 90% for the exam scores. You definitely have to rethink things a little bit. But I like to help students learn or earn credit for just about anything they're doing in class as long as it's working towards the learning outcomes. And so it does require more of, okay, 10 points for this, 10 points for that, 5 for this. I mean, just depending on how much I think it's valued in the classroom and how much effort it takes for them.
Okay.
Right, so,
Edward, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, Edward, I think it's similar. How about the assessment in the flipped classroom? Same as the traditional?
Again, depending on how you look at traditional. If it's really like, oh, my students just need to come to class and then I grade them on exams, an occasional homework, then it's definitely going to require a rethinking. I haven't used that for a while. I want students to get credit for everything they do, and for me that has helped increase the value of being in class every day. And so by having activities that are worth something on a daily basis, they need to be there to earn those points. And so it's not a stretch for what I'm doing even before I learned more about flipping. Great. But it does require rethinking. So if you're thinking about flipping, whether we're talking a couple of days or an entire semester, we need to think some things through ahead of time. And one is you need to know what your local curriculum requirements are. Your school probably has definitions for what a traditional delivery is, online, hybrid, web enhanced, or any other types that may be specific to your school. Those are the main ones we use. And so you need to be careful. For us specifically, a traditional delivery doesn't exclude the opportunity of providing information online, but we have to make sure that it doesn't replace the classroom time. And we also have to make sure that we don't do any assessment online. And so to work with that, then I'll do not necessarily quizzes, but they'll get pop-up questions at the end of a video, or they will have to do some writing, and I'll address that in a few minutes with a slide, but do a written response to the video that then they turn that in as homework. So it's not assessment necessarily, but it is one of their assignments. And so you got to be careful not to cross unintentionally cross boundaries. So be careful of that. Also, like requirements or limitations affecting traditional delivery, that's one I just mentioned. Remember that it's not replacing face-to-face contact. We still need to meet, generally for most of us, 51 hours in a semester. And this is just pushing some of the responsibility for learning out to students on their time in that, additional 100 approximately hours that they should be spending preparing for their education. And then just be careful. And if you think you could be stepping over a boundary or are concerned about it, talk to your college curriculum committee. They know the local regulations more than anyone else. I'd be cautious from the start, though. Consider your course content. Think about what you're teaching. A lot of the early adopters or examples for flipped classrooms dealt more with sciences and math especially, because they do so much more opportunity for hands-on stuff. I've used it with speech. I've used it some with English, although, there's more talking that has to go on in English sometimes, and so some things lend itself better. So, first think, what could work better if we take it from homework when they might struggle on their own and bring it into the classroom? Is there some things that would work great as activities that right now I don't get to do anything with? Is there some things they need more assistance with? Or if I can come up with things that reinforce the concepts, would that help with student learning? Those might be great things to start to consider bringing into the class instead of sending home as homework. And then consider the reverse. What could be best taken from class time to homework? Is it just explaining things and giving demonstrations? Those might be easy videos to make, and students can be responsible for those on their time. What information might students want to access repeatedly or catch up on if they miss a day? That stuff might be great pushed into homework. And also just think of ease of capture. If it might be easy to capture, it might be easy to send home and put onto the flip side, and then open up some classroom time for other activities. So think a little bit about what you're teaching and how you're teaching it. Another, and you guys have asked some great questions about this, but address accountability. How can we ensure that they're watching the videos? I want them to be reading their textbook. I tell them that's required, but how can I be sure now that they are? Quizzes that they don't seem to care that they do well on or do poorly on, and things. But we can sometimes embed quizzes or questions or even assignment prompts within a video. Just kind of midway through say, hey, by the way, write down these 3 things or answer these 3 questions, and you're going to be turning those in next class. And then continue on with some more video. I like the idea of embedding it, even just written responses, not necessarily quizzes, because a student can't just skip to the end of the video in some way and catch the important information related to an assignment or points available, and then walk in with that information without watching the whole thing. So kind of mixing it up. Some recommend assigning a short writing response to summarize what was covered, or even to have students prepare some questions to ask after watching the video. So the critical thinking idea, like, okay, you've given me this information, what can I do with it? Or like we may do with textbooks now, is do follow-up quizzes in class. And a combination of all of these, plus I mentioned peer pressure before, can help to hopefully motivate students who care much about their education to take responsibility and watch the videos at home. And then as with most anything, start simple. It's pretty overwhelming to think I'm going to flip my entire class. But if you think, hey, I want to experiment with this, roll out 1 or 2 lectures in advance. It's much easier to plan for that. It's a lot easier to get feedback from students. Say, how was that? Did that work for you? How was that compared to other lectures I've done? How were the activities in response to that? And just getting feedback from students early. And I find student feedback valuable. They're usually right on with most of the feedback they offer. And then you can make more changes if you're going to continue to do stuff, and it's definitely time-saving and more effective than having to redo stuff later because you got some great feedback after you planned way too far ahead. You can use some basic video capture software. YouTube really does work very well, and with that you can use basic video capture on any laptop anymore, computer, iPad, your smartphones, or even a visual camera. I use a flip camera a lot because I can use it anywhere I am. You do probably need to think a little bit about equipment. You can capture video pretty easily. Be careful about sound if you're doing something that requires more demonstration or moving around. I was speaking with an audio instructor here yesterday, and we're considering doing some stuff with a couple of his classes. And when he's demonstrating something working on an engine, let's say, he's not really going to be standing in front of a blackboard the entire time, not moving and easily capturing sound. So then we have to, okay, how can we capture what he's showing and doing while also making sure we can capture sound? So sometimes you may need to consider a microphone or, again, something more mobile than just the video capture on your laptop. Your phones even can work great for that. In some way you need to capture and edit the video, or at least be prepared to edit the video that you capture, and this doesn't require a whole lot. As I said, YouTube, wonderful. And if you didn't see Donna Isone's presentation on capturing video and editing it on YouTube, it was a few weeks ago. Good information there, and very simple for folks who don't even feel like they're real technologically capable, and she lays it out pretty well. Another, if you want to kind of catch what you're doing on your desktop, whether it's just catching images or processes on your desktop, screencast-o-matic.com works. It's free. I've always used it as free. I think you can actually upgrade if you want to capture longer and get rid of their little watermark, but for the most part you can use it for free. Most of our computers, smartphones, and cameras have some sort of an app that's free, comes along with it, and you can use the basic stuff. TechSmith has a few products that they use, starting with Jing, which is free, and it's all at techsmith.com, and then moving up into higher levels of editing if you want to make things look nice, polished, and professional. The reality is most of us aren't going to. at least not to start with. So start simple and start free. That's kind of the nice thing. There's so many options out there. And this is only a small list of possibilities. Going back to your curriculum, really think about your content and not just, okay, what works better flipping and what works better bringing it into the classroom, but how do I want to capture this information? Is it best to just capture me speaking to you, the whole talking head idea? Or is it more about the content or the process? The video of, a flipped classroom is not earlier. We didn't need to see the teacher or instructor doing that. He used animations or, printed pages that were cut out that worked well. Others sit next to the whiteboard and write and work through things to show that. Others might, bring in clips of other videos. I do with speaking. Just give some thought to how do I want to approach this. And it doesn't always have to be the same way. It's really specific to each piece of content that you're aiming to share with students. Keep in mind the realities. Most of us aren't film producers. We're teachers. We're educators. And so, going back to the idea, keep it really simple. It's much more effective and easier to produce, especially early on. So don't try to get real fancy with anything. If a talking head is easier to produce and get the information to students, do it. That's what they're seeing in the classroom in most cases anyway. If you just want to record your voice while you are writing on the board, do it. That, again, is some of what they're seeing in the classroom. So start basic and be a little bit less overwhelmed as a result. And then again, it's with anything new, plan to experiment. Keep your videos short to start with. Don't think I'm going to replace my 45-minute lecture on English punctuation. Instead, think of short pieces. A few minutes about some guidelines for commas, and a few minutes some guidelines for use of quotation marks. And if you break it up that way, it's easier to capture and it's easier for students to go listen and pay attention to when they need either that short review or even when they only have a short amount of time to focus in for a few minutes. So really think one concept at a time. Try capturing from different approaches, angles, and using different techniques, and find something that works well for you and ends up with a product that works well enough for students. And then get feedback. Really, especially as you start, get some feedback from others, not just other people in education. At work, ask colleagues, and at home, get the spouse to give you some response, or get the kids to give you a response. See, they know tech better than any of us. And then, catch up with those that may owe you a favor and say, hey, take a look at this. Give me some feedback. And that way someone who's brand new to it might be able to give you some valuable input. And then rely on students a little bit. Don't be afraid to say, hey, give me some thoughts on this. So, about an individual lecture perhaps, but then also about just the collective use of it. How effective was it when you've done it a couple of times? Were they able to get the concepts in a different way? Did they like the format? Was it useful for them, or do they want you to keep just talking in front of class? And then it's not just about what you're sending home and putting online and making available for students for the pre-learning. It's about what you're doing in the classroom, and so we don't want to forget about that. Definitely explore ideas that promote critical thinking and hands-on and integration into what they're learning and applying it. Explore individual as well as collaborative activities. And the question came up about what about the student that wants to work individually. By using both and exploring a variety of types of activities, hopefully every student gets to work in their strength and then also gets to gain the skills of working in the areas they're not quite as comfortable. That's a great real-world application. And then really one of the strengths of flipped classrooms is that you get to engage individually with students and really try to do that. That's where students can benefit immensely. And then at some point you definitely need to consider assessing the effectiveness, and it's something to think about from the start. How are you going to decide that? The example of the biology instructor at CLU, his plan needed to get modified halfway through because he was finding out all of his students were accessing the material, but definitely have a plan for how am I going to measure this? How do I know it's effective? And so, qualitative as well as quantitative possibilities will work. Get feedback, review your own perceptions of how students are doing, just in general and then in comparison to other classes, and then look at quantitatives, get your scores, see what they look like, look at the success and retention rates much later if you do a lot of flipping with the class, especially in comparison to another. Questions? Lots of stuff so far.
Yeah, let's see. We're getting to the end of our time. So let me see. Donna Eyestone was asking about whether you use a script.
In a little bit that I've done, I've experimented with both, and it's definitely easier to use a script. And I think she had promoted that in one of her videos. And I find myself, if I don't work off of a script, even though I can walk into a classroom and deliver the lecture without too many real mistakes, I find myself just stuttering in front of a camera when even all by myself in my office. So it's much easier to work off of a script, and it saves some time in the long run. I definitely would recommend that.
Yeah, there's just a lot of comments.
And I see too, providing the script to students is a great idea too. I mean, that helps with some of the captioning problems too.
Yeah,
I just thought
I think that an estimate of how much time is needed to produce a 15-minute video, but it sounds to me like you were suggesting even shorter amounts of time.
A 15-minute could take long, and I'd say that would be a tough one to capture all in one shoot, so you would have to use iMovie or whatever you have on the PC. I just gave myself away as a Mac user. Nice. You'd have to use something to edit into a 15-minute video, and so it might not make that much time, but I would really keep them short. Students' attention spans are short, and it's much easier to edit a short video than it is to try to compile a long one. I think if you put 3 5-minute ones together or 5 3-minute ones together to get that 15 minutes of content, you will use your time more effectively with the short ones. Well, the last few slides are primarily resources, and you're going to get these PowerPoints I think sent out to you, plus they're in the archive. And there's just some articles and some information that's available. The one at the bottom of this first list has some link to some research results in some places. Also on the next one, a couple more, some feedback. One very current, just came out winter 2012 in EdNext. And some information on vodcasting from University of Northern Colorado. Gave me a little bit of information as well at first. And then just generally, I mean, anymore we have the internet at our disposal, so do some searching, both in YouTube and then just generally online or in some of our research databases. And there's more and more being put out. It's a very current topic. That's why I feel like I'm a rookie. It's happening faster than any of us. I'm just latching onto the idea and deciding I like some of what it has to offer from my classroom in my teaching style. And whether I completely flip or not, I'm not sure, but I certainly like some of the concepts, and I'll integrate some of them. And hopefully some of you will consider it. Students seem to respond well to it.
Excellent. We are just getting all sorts of people are sending out the love that they really enjoyed the presentation and all the sharing of resources. And so we will be sending that all out to you, an email with the links and the PowerPoint slides and also the other resources. Anything else you want to add, Cheryl? Or
thank you to everyone who joined us today. We had quite a crowd, and obviously shows that it's a topic of interest. And I appreciate the feedback and the questions being asked in the chat window. It'll be interesting to go back and look at some of the questions later to address in future conversations. But thank you for joining us, taking time out of your lunch, or in Australia out of your breakfast, and spend an hour with us today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And everybody was really nice about the little oopsies. And,
thanks for hanging on with that. Yeah,
I love that. They were all, understanding. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll be sending out an email. And thank you, Cheryl. Obviously, we had over 400 people sign up for this.
Wow.
Lots of interest in it. And so I really appreciate you sharing all your information and, good thoughts about it. So, all right.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.